Hey, you won't believe this eerie experience I had at the library. I've been working there for years, but one day, something, or rather, someone, caught my attention. There was this older man, always camped out in the same corner, utterly engrossed in the same book every time. I tried chatting with him a few times, just being friendly, but he never even flinched. It was as if he was in his own little world. Curiosity got the better of me. I had to know what was so captivating. Sneaking a peek, I found him reading an old worn-out book titled The Lives of the Lost. It chronicled these tragic tales of people who had vanished over the years. Creepy, right? But back then, I brushed it off. Weeks flew by and the man kept coming back, always with that book, never checking it out. The way he turned the pages felt almost ritualistic. Each time I saw him, I couldn't shake this growing sense of dread. It was like he was somehow entwined with those stories as if he were living them. One day, I mustered the courage to ask him, "What do you find so fascinating about that book?" I tried to keep it casual. He finally looked up and his eyes were wide and hollow, chilling.
They all have stories, but none of them are finished.
That sent a shiver down my spine. I began digging into the names mentioned in the book and quickly became unsettled. Each story was darker than the last. Betrayal, obsession, and ultimately disappearance. I thought my heart might stop when I stumbled upon a recent disappearance right here in our town, eerily mirroring one of the book's tales. Panicked, I rushed back to the library, but the man had vanished. I searched everywhere, but no trace of him. Or the book. It was like they both had been erased. I felt sheer panic, realizing I needed to alert someone, but who would believe such a tale? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying our conversation. Just as I was about to drift off, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, and there he was, that same vacant look in his eyes. "You need to finish the story," he murmured, slipping a piece of paper into my hand. It had my name on it, along with a date tomorrow. Now, I'm left wondering what happens next. You won't believe what happened at the library where I work. We hosted a true crime book club every Wednesday night. At first, it seemed like any other group, just a few dedicated fans of the genre. But things took a dark turn one evening when they chose a particularly sinister book about a serial killer who once terrorized our town. The author dug deep into the killer's mind, exploring not only the crimes but also the eerie way they chose their victims. As the group discussed the book, the atmosphere shifted. Everyone became tense, their voices hushed and grave. The following week, Claire, one of our regulars, didn't show up. I assumed something had come up. But then, another week passed, and word spread that Claire had disappeared. The police were called in and the club was shaken. It was surreal, like living in a horror story. Then it got even stranger. After each meeting, a different member would vanish. First Claire, then someone else, and then another. It felt like discussing these sinister stories was somehow summoning a dark force. I tried to brush it off as a coincidence, but deep down, a nagging fear took root. By the time the last member dropped out, I was the only one left. It felt like the killer was hunting me through the pages of those books. Desperate for answers, I spent a late night pulling all the true crime books from the shelves, searching for any clue. That's when I discovered an old notebook hidden inside one of the books. Its pages were filled with frantic notes about our club, detailed insights into each member, and a final entry that froze my blood. The last one is next. I dropped the notebook, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut. I was trapped. Footsteps echoed in the darkness, and I finally understood the terrifying truth. I had become part of the story. Have I told you about the day that author came to our library for a book signing? It's been weeks since then, but I still can't shake the memory. This author wasn't just any writer. He was a local legend. Known for his dark and twisted narrative about obsession and betrayal, I'd been anticipating his arrival like a kid waiting for Christmas. But what started as excitement soon turned into something of a nightmare. The author arrived late, his hair a mess, and kept darting glances around the room. Something was off. Still, fans lined up with eager smiles, and he obliged with a smile that looked more like a grimace. Initially, I thought he was just overwhelmed by the turnout. But as the minutes ticked by, an odd tension filled the air. After the last book was signed, I approached him to express my gratitude. "You were great," I said, hoping to ease whatever anxiety had taken hold. He met my gaze with wild eyes.
You have to be careful. There are things you don't know.
I chuckled nervously, but his words clung to me, leaving a chill in their wake. That evening took a darker turn when a friend called with shocking news. The author had been found dead in his hotel room. They claimed it was a heart attack, but something felt off about the whole situation. Determined to understand, I went back to the library the next day and started digging through his past. I stumbled upon a series of letters between him and an obsessive fan. These weren't ordinary fan letters. They spoke of a desire to become one with his work. The letters grew increasingly erratic, filled with disturbing sketches that mirrored scenes from his book. The deeper I dug, the more the unease gnawed at me. I decided to contact the publisher, hoping to learn more about this mysterious fan. That's when I discovered the fan had vanished weeks before the event. A chilling coincidence I couldn't ignore. Leaving the publisher's office, my phone buzzed with a new message. "You shouldn't have looked." My blood ran cold. Panic settled in as I realized I was trapped in this dark web, much like the author's stories. I raced back to the library, only to find the lights flickering ominously. In the silence, I felt the weight of a presence behind me. I turned sharply, but there were only shadows on the walls. I've got to tell you about this unsettling experience I had at the library. You know, I've always loved the peace and quiet there, the smell of old books, the way time seems to stand still. But one day, everything changed. I stumbled upon this collection of diaries that had been donated. They were tucked away in a dusty corner of the archives, their covers faded and worn. They belonged to a woman named Margaret who lived in our town decades ago. At first, her entries seemed ordinary, notes about her daily life and mundane interactions. But as I read on, her words darkened, filled with paranoia and obsession. Margaret wrote extensively about her neighbors, detailing their every move, her thoughts spiraling into a world of fear and suspicion. She was convinced someone was watching her, plotting against her. At first, I dismissed it as the ramblings of a lonely soul. But then I hit an entry that sent chills down my spine. Margaret described a family, a couple and their young daughter who lived next door. The final entry was haunting. "They're coming for me tonight. I can feel it." Intrigued and a bit horrified, I started piecing together the timeline. To my shock, I discovered that the family she described vanished without a trace. I rushed back to the archives, hoping to find more clues, but the records were sparse. It was as if the town had buried the memory. But then I found something else. Old photos, yellowed and crumbling. In one, I recognized the family, and standing behind them, almost hidden, was Margaret, her face twisted in a manic smile. I felt a knot form in my stomach. That night, I thought I heard whispers echoing through the library, but when I turned, there was only silence and shadows. Determined to confront my fear, I returned to the archives the next day to finish reading. The last diary held the final entry, but it wasn't in Margaret's handwriting. It was scrawled, frantic and uneven. "I am them now," it read. "I will take what's mine." Heart pounding, I dropped the diary. As I turned to leave, I saw the reflection of someone standing behind me in the glass of the bookcase. I whipped around, but no one was there. I made for the exit, but it felt like the library itself was closing in on me. I haven't dared to return since, terrified I might find myself in the next diary entry.